Christmas Eve, 1945. A crisp, festive chill hung in the air over Fayetteville, West Virginia. A dusting of fresh snow shimmered under the pale moonlight, blanketing the small, close-knit town in a serene, almost magical quiet. Inside the humble yet lively home of George and Jennie Sodder, the air vibrated with the joyous chaos of a large family on the cusp of Christmas. The aroma of Italian-American cooking lingered, mingling with the scent of pine from a freshly decorated tree. George, a proud Italian immigrant, built a successful trucking business, and Jennie, his devoted wife, presided over a bustling household of 10 children. Their life, though hard-working, was rich with warmth, tradition, and the boisterous energy that only a big family can create, especially on a night filled with such eager anticipation. The children, brimming with holiday excitement, were particularly restless that night. 5 of the older ones, Marion, 17, Martha, 12, Louis, 9, Jennie, 8, and Betty, 5, had begged to stay up past their bedtime, playing with new toys on the living room floor. Their parents, perhaps softened by the spirit of the season, indulged them, allowing them to remain awake long after the younger children had been tucked into bed. Finally, around 10 p.m., George and Jennie retired for the night, leaving the older children to their innocent revelry, the sounds of their laughter a comforting backdrop to the quiet house. Then, around 1 a.m., the peace shattered. Jennie awoke to the acrid, unmistakable smell of smoke. Moments later, a dull thud, as if something had struck the roof, startled her. She quickly roused George. He discovered the horrifying source. A fire was already engulfing his small office, where the telephone line entered the house, flames licking ominously around the wires. Panic, raw and hungry, seized them. George, Jennie, and 4 of their children, Marion, who had gone back to bed, woke up. Sylvia, 3, John, 2, and George Jr., 5, managed to scramble out of the house through windows. 5 children, Maurice, 14, Martha, 12, Louis, 9, Jennie, 8, and Betty, 5, were still trapped upstairs. The parents could hear their terrified screams from the second story, a sound that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. George, a man of strength and resolve, launched into a desperate, heroic, yet ultimately futile series of rescue attempts. He ran to the back of the house, intending to reach the children via the stairs, but the wooden steps were already a roaring inferno, an impassable barrier of flame. His mind racing, he spotted 2 of his own work trucks parked outside, a coal truck and a water truck, that he could use to get a ladder or simply reach the second-story windows. But to his utter bewilderment and growing despair, neither truck would start. He cranked and cranked, the engine sputtering, groaning, but refusing to turn over. This was a critical, bizarre detail that would later fuel his deepest suspicions. Both trucks had been working perfectly the day before. Frantically, George tried to find a ladder. The one they usually kept against the side of the house was inexplicably gone. He broke open 2 rain barrels, hoping to douse the flames with water, but both were mysteriously empty, despite recent rainfall. Meanwhile, their eldest daughter, Marion, ran to a neighbor's house to call the fire department. But even that proved agonizingly difficult. The neighbor's phone was out of order. She ran to another neighbor, then another, finally reaching someone who could make the call. The Fayetteville Fire Department was only 2.5 miles away. Yet, in a devastating twist, they took an inexplicably long time to arrive. Hours, according to the Sodders, with conflicting reports about their exact response time. By the time they did, the wooden house was little more than a raging inferno, the roof already collapsed. By dawn, the Sodder home was reduced to a smoldering, charred foundation, everything within it incinerated. The assumption, a crushing, agonizing certainty, was that the 5 children trapped upstairs had perished in the inferno. As the first gray light of Christmas morning broke over Fayetteville, it illuminated a scene of utter devastation. The Sodder family home, once a beacon of warmth and laughter, was now a smoking, skeletal ruin. A small, close-knit community rallied, offering comfort and condolences, but for George and Jennie, the horror was just beginning. The immediate, heartbreaking task was to recover the remains of their 5 beloved children. A local funeral director, a man named F.J. Maurice, was quickly brought to the scene. The painstaking, grim process of sifting through the still smoldering ashes began. George, Jennie, and other volunteers combed through the debris, their hearts aching with every shovelful, desperately searching for any trace, any bone, any definitive proof that their children were indeed gone. But what they found, or rather, what they didn't find, became the first and most powerful catalyst for their enduring torment. Despite the intense heat of the fire, which had consumed almost everything else, no human remains were found. Not a single bone fragment, not a tooth, no skull, no discernible trace of the 5 missing children. Maurice, the funeral director, made a chilling observation. A fire hot enough to completely cremate human bodies would have also destroyed the house's foundation, the furnace, and every other solid structure. Yet the foundation was intact, and the furnace was still standing, albeit damaged. Maurice himself, in later years, would express his profound bewilderment at the complete lack of remains. Despite this shocking absence of evidence, a local fire marshal quickly arrived at a definitive, seemingly convenient conclusion: the children had perished in the fire. He stated, perhaps dismissively, that bones disintegrate completely in intense heat. This conclusion, delivered with an almost callous swiftness given the lack of proof, felt rushed and profoundly unsatisfying to George and Jennie. They simply couldn't accept it. Their children were gone, yes, but not in the way the authorities claimed. The lack of remains became a constant, gnawing void, fueling a growing suspicion in the parents' minds. Then, other strange occurrences, seemingly minor at the time, began to resurface in their memory, taking on a sinister new light. Just weeks before the fire, a man attempting to sell life insurance had visited George. When George refused to buy a policy, the man reportedly issued a chilling warning. His house would go up in smoke, and his children would be destroyed. Adding to this unease, a stranger was seen watching the children from the road in the days leading up to Christmas Eve. There were also the inexplicable failures on the night of the fire itself. The 2 trucks, which had been working perfectly, mysteriously refused to start. The rain barrels, inexplicably empty despite recent rainfall, offered no water to fight the flames. And then, a small yet profoundly unsettling detail. A broken shutter, which George was sure had been latched, was found thrown some distance from the house after the fire, almost as if someone had deliberately tampered with it before the blaze began. Against the backdrop of these disturbing anomalies, death certificates were issued for the 5 missing children. A memorial service was held, filled with the somber grief of a community trying to heal. But George and Jennie Sodder, clutching onto the agonizing absence of any physical remains, stubbornly refused to believe their children were truly gone. Their conviction solidified. Their children had not died in the fire. They had vanished. The official conclusion, swiftly delivered and based on a disturbing lack of evidence, did little to quell the Sodder parents' mounting conviction. For George and Jennie, the silence of the ashes, the terrifying absence of their children's remains, was not an ending, but the beginning of a relentless, decades-long quest. Fueled by a mother's unshakable intuition and a father's fierce determination, they dedicated their lives and every penny of their savings to finding their missing children. They believed, with every fiber of their being, that Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jennie, and Betty were still alive. Their initial desperate attempts to find answers met with resistance and skepticism from local authorities. So the Sodders took matters into their own hands. They hired private investigators, spending their life savings to chase down every lead, no matter how remote. They erected massive billboards along Route 16, a major highway through Fayetteville. These heartbreaking pleas, featuring enlarged photos of their missing children and offering a $5,000 reward, later increased to $10,000, became a permanent, agonizing fixture in the landscape, a silent scream into the void, a testament to their unwavering hope. Years after the fire, in 1949, George and Jennie, still unable to accept the official story, decided to dig up the remaining soil at the fire site. They sifted through the debris again, meticulously, painstakingly. And then they found something, a single small bone fragment. With renewed hope, they sent it to the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. The Smithsonian's findings were both profound and unsettling. The fragment was indeed a human vertebra, belonging to a person aged 16 to 22. But crucially, it showed no signs of having been exposed to fire. This was an enormous, devastating discrepancy. How did a human bone, untouched by flames, end up at the site of a fire so intense it supposedly cremated 5 children? Did it belong to one of the older children, Maurice or Martha, who somehow escaped the fire and then met another fate? Or was it simply a random bone, perhaps placed there by accident or design after the fact? The mystery deepened, a chilling confirmation of their doubts. Other peculiar clues continued to emerge, painting an increasingly sinister picture. Investigators discovered that the telephone lines leading to the Sodder home had been cut, not burned through by the fire, shortly before the blaze began. This wasn't an accident. It suggested deliberate sabotage, an act designed to prevent the family from calling for help. Witness accounts also began to surface, adding layers of bewildering possibility. A woman from a nearby tourist court claimed to have seen the missing children in a car being driven away by strangers during the fire. Another woman at a Charleston tourist court reportedly saw the children a few days later, accompanied by 2 men and 2 women, seemingly relaxed and unharmed. A motel owner in South Carolina claimed to have seen the children a week after the fire, casually telling her, "Our home burned down," in a matter-of-fact way, as if the fire was merely an inconvenience, not a tragedy. The inexplicable oddities surrounding the fire itself, 2 trucks that wouldn't start, the rain barrels, the missing ladder, now seemed less like cruel coincidences and more like calculated obstructions. Pieces, viewed through the Sodders' grieving, suspicious eyes, began to form a terrifying mosaic of foul play. And then, a darker, more dangerous theory began to circulate, fueled by whispers and the era's prejudice. Some speculated that George Sodder, being an Italian immigrant, might have ties to the mafia, a connection he vehemently denied. The fire and disappearance, then, could have been a revenge kidnapping, a professional act of intimidation or extortion. This theory, though unproven, added a chilling layer of organized crime to the already bewildering mystery, suggesting a level of planning and execution far beyond what local authorities initially considered. The unburned bone, the cut phone line, the vanished children, it all pointed to something far more sinister than a simple house fire. For decades, the billboards stood sentinel along Route 16, a silent, heartbreaking plea from parents who refused to give up. George and Jennie Sodder became local legends, their tireless quest for answers a testament to an unbreakable bond. Every tip, every fleeting hope was pursued with a renewed surge of adrenaline, only to inevitably crash into the wall of reality. They traveled endlessly, across states, sometimes across the country, chasing whispers of sightings, interviewing strangers, clinging to any thread that might lead them to their children. But definitive proof always eluded them. The years turned into decades. The physical clues withered, the original witnesses aged and passed away, and the official investigation languished, unable to find any conclusive evidence. Yet the Sodder family's hope never truly died, often reignited by bizarre, tantalizing glimpses of what might have been. The most crucial, haunting, and truly strange development in the case came in 1967, more than 2 decades after the fire. Jennie Sodder received a photograph in the mail. It was postmarked from Central City, Kentucky. On the back, in an unfamiliar hand, a chilling message was scrawled. "Louis Sodder, I love brother Frankie, Illo boys, A90132 and 35. The photograph itself showed a young man in his 20s. He had the same dark, piercing eyes, the same curly dark hair, and an uncanny resemblance to what Louis Sodder might have looked like as an adult. For George and Jennie, it was an electrifying moment of recognition. They believed, unequivocally, that this was their missing son. The message, though cryptic, Ilil boys possibly meaning LL boys, referring to Louis and his brother Maurice, who were often together, felt like a desperate attempt at communication. Fueled by this renewed hope, George and Jennie hired another private detective. This detective traveled to Central City, Kentucky, determined to make contact with the person in the photograph. What happened next deepened the mystery and added another layer of chilling uncertainty to the Sodder saga. The detective reportedly made contact with the individual in the photo, gathering some information, but then, inexplicably, he vanished himself. He was never heard from again, leaving behind no notes, no reports, no explanation for his disappearance. The entire line of inquiry went cold, leaving the Sodders devastated and even more convinced that powerful, unseen forces were working against them. Other potential sightings and contacts continued to trickle in over the years, each one adding to the unsettling narrative of children who walked the line between life and death. One of the surviving Sodder children, Sylvia, who remained deeply haunted by the loss of her siblings, once saw a woman at a local store whom she believed to be one of the women reportedly involved in the abduction. But before Sylvia could react, the woman disappeared into the crowd. There were also numerous reports of people claiming to know the children's whereabouts, or even claiming to be the children themselves, only for their stories to fall apart under scrutiny. These were cruel hoaxes, preying on the Sodders. The Louis Sodder photograph became a focal point of their hope and agony. It was a tangible piece of a possible future, a glimpse of a life that might have been. Yet, without definitive confirmation, it was merely another piece of the cruel cosmic puzzle. The Louis in the photo remained a phantom, a living ghost of a child who may or may not be alive, forever suspended in the agonizing limbo of the unexplained. The Sodder family's story became a testament to a truth more terrifying than a monster, the horror of not knowing. The unrelenting search for the Sodder children consumed George and Jennie's lives. George Sodder, the patriarch who had desperately tried to rescue his children from the flames, died in 1968, his heart broken, never knowing the true fate of his 5 missing children. Jennie, however, was a force of unwavering determination. She continued the search, maintaining the iconic billboard along Route 16 until her own death in 1989. Their lives became a singular, agonizing testament to parental love and an unbreakable, desperate hope in the face of an enduring, maddening mystery. The surviving Sodder children, Marion, Sylvia, John, and George Jr., inherited this chilling legacy. They, too, continued to search for answers, sometimes privately, sometimes speaking to media, but the trail grew colder with each passing year, and fragments of information more elusive. Sylvia, in particular, remained dedicated to finding her siblings. She lived in the original Sodder family home, which had been rebuilt, refusing to tear down the last vestiges of the tragedy. For her, and for the entire family, the missing children were not ghosts, but living, breathing questions that haunted every aspect of their existence. The case remains officially unsolved, with no definitive, universally accepted explanation for the Christmas Eve fire, the complete lack of human remains, or the subsequent disappearance of the 5 children. The FBI, which had briefly been involved in the investigation, eventually closed its file, unable to find any conclusive evidence to move forward. The competing theories surrounding the Sodder children's fate continue to be debated, each with its own unsettling implications. They died in the fire. This remains the official stance of many authorities. However, it is strongly contradicted by the complete absence of human remains and other strange occurrences. Forensic experts argue that a fire hot enough to completely cremate 5 bodies would have left almost nothing of the house behind, including the foundation and furnace, which were notably intact. Human bone fragments and teeth almost always survive even the most intense fires. Kidnapping and arson. This was the unwavering belief of the Sodder parents. This theory is supported by a mountain of peculiar evidence: the mysteriously cut telephone lines, the unburned bone fragment found years later, the inexplicable failure of both trucks to start, the empty rain barrels, the strange warning from the insurance salesman, and the compelling witness accounts of the children being seen after the fire. If it was a kidnapping, who was behind it, and why? Was it related to George's strong opinions, his rumored, though unproven, ties to organized crime, or simply a random act of malevolence? The sheer professionalism implied by the clean disappearance of the children points to a highly organized operation. Accidental fire with unfound remains. While statistically possible that some remains might be missed, the complete lack of any trace of 5 children in a residential fire is, as fire investigators themselves noted, highly improbable to the point of being almost impossible. The legacy of the Sodder children's disappearance is inextricably linked to the haunting image of the billboard along Route 16. It became a powerful, iconic symbol of parental love, unwavering hope, and the chilling reality of an unsolved mystery that defied logic and closed doors. It was a silent scream into the void, a testament to the fact that some questions refuse to be answered, no matter how desperately the living search. The Mary Celeste was a ghost ship of the sea. Its crew vanished into the vast ocean. The Sodder children's home became a ghost house, its precious occupants vanishing from solid ground, from the very warmth of their beds, on a night meant for celebration. The lack of closure, the phantom presence of what happened, creates an emotional and psychological haunting far more profound than any spectral apparition. It's a stark, terrifying reminder that sometimes the most terrifying monsters aren't supernatural entities from the depths, but the cold, unanswered questions left behind by inexplicable human tragedies. The true horror lies in not knowing, in the agonizing limbo of perpetual uncertainty. The fate of the Sodder children remains a chilling secret, buried not in ashes, but in the enduring silence of a Christmas Eve long, long ago.